There once was an unstoppable force. It smashed into an immovable object. The unstoppable force and the immovable object were about to destroy the universe. Well, maybe not right away, but eventually they would, because the paradox that goes, what happens if an unstoppable force meets an immovable object isn't really a paradox at all. That is, it doesn't require any new physics to resolve. All you need is some basic relativity and a good understanding of what unstoppable and immovable actually mean. You might think that these are pretty intuitive concepts, but as is often the case when philosophers get involved, they're actually quite difficult to pin down. For example, we know from Einstein's theory of special relativity that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. So if you try to imagine an unstoppable force, you might think it could be something that moves faster than light. But then that means it would have infinite mass, which means it would be an infinitely massive object, which brings us to our first conclusion. An immovable object would have to be infinitely massive because only something that has infinite mass could exert a gravitational pull so strong that nothing, not even light, could escape its grasp. And actually, an unstoppable force would also have to be infinitely massive for similar reasons. That's because mass is a measure of how much matter an object contains. And if you wanted to accelerate an object, say double its speed, you'd have to exert a force on it for some distance. Force equals mass times acceleration. So to get a large acceleration, you'd have to exert a large force over a large distance. But if you keep increasing the speed, you're going to keep needing more and more force and more distance. Eventually, you'd need infinite force to get an object moving at the speed of light. And of course, that means you'd need infinite mass. So now we've concluded that an immovable object and an unstoppable force are basically the same thing, an object with infinite mass. But that raises another problem. Why doesn't the unstoppable force just, stop? If they're the same thing, why don't they cancel each other out? Well, the answer is they do. They annihilate each other in a burst of light and energy. Let's take a step back and consider what we're actually imagining when we picture an unstoppable force. We're imagining something that's speeding along, maybe smashing into planets and not slowing down one bit. But that's only true from our point of view. Remember, according to Einstein, all motion is relative. There is no absolute frame of reference. So from some other frame of reference, the unstoppable force would appear to be standing still. That's because the very concept of an unstoppable force depends on the idea that there's no other frame of reference in which it could be moving. In other words, an unstoppable force is something that can never be brought to rest. And the only way that's possible is if it has infinite mass. Similarly, an immovable object is something that can never be moved. And the only way that's possible is if it also has infinite mass. But here's the kicker. An object with infinite mass would also have infinite energy. And as any good physicist knows, mass and energy are interchangeable. In fact, they're just different manifestations of the same thing. So an immovable object and an unstoppable force aren't two different things. They're just two different ways of looking at the same thing. And if they ever met, they wouldn't smash into each other and destroy the universe. They would just pass straight through each other because they're both infinitely massive. In fact, they'd both be infinitely transparent. Nothing could slow them down or deflect them because they're both infinitely massive. That means there's nothing in the universe that could possibly stop them. They'd just keep going forever, possibly smashing into other things and speeding up even more until every star in the sky goes out and the entire universe turns to dust. And then they'll keep going even after that. So if you're ever confronted by an unstoppable force, just remember it's really just an immovable object in disguise. And if you can get past the infinite mass and infinite energy parts, you'll realize that they really aren't anything at all. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to help us make even more great science videos, you can join our community on a crowdfunding platform.